Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Clay Guida to defeat Kenny Florian. And I'm here to talk about Jimmy Flick versus Alessandro Costa. Jimmy Flick is 32 years old. He is 16-6 as a pro, and he's got 3 inches of height and 3.5 inches of reach on Alessandro Costa, who is 28 years old and has a record of 12-3. This fight should produce a finish. That's how I see this fight playing out. A finish. I'm predicting Alessandro Costa gets the finish. But even if I'm wrong, I still expect a finish. Jimmy Flick, it's one way or the other with him. 16-6, like I said, 14 submission wins, 2 decision wins in his 16 victories. No TKOs, obviously, but 14 subs. This guy's an incredibly dangerous submission artist, as we saw in his UFC debut against Cody Durden, where he hit a beautiful flying triangle. That's the answer when you're fighting a guy you can't out-wrestle. And he found a way to get him out of the fight in round 1. Of course, when he can out-wrestle you, when he's got the physical advantage, which isn't often, it's probably not going to be too often at the UFC level, to be honest, but Jimmy Flick's a monster on top. A monster. You know, he'll work your arm triangle, arm bar. His arm triangle's really solid. He's gotten guillotine chokes, choked out Johnny Bedford, former UFC fighter. That was in round 3, by the way. He also got this guy out of there in round 3, Nate Smith, with an arm triangle choke over in the LFA. Jimmy Flick, he's always dangerous, but here at the UFC level, he's outgunned physically in most fights. And I think that's taken away a lot of his options. He's not going to be able to rip somebody to the forward and cut right through him, like he did to this guy Greg Fisher. Got a 30-second armbar. Here, Jimmy Flick, he's going to be forced to get more creative, like he did with Cody Durden. And if he's not able to, I feel like Jimmy Flick, at the UFC level, he's a one-rounder bust fighter. You can't say that outside the UFC, but inside the UFC, I think that's what he's going to be relegated to, reduced to, because he's not going to be winning the wrestling battle, the physicality battle, and his striking is just not, it's solid, but it's not powerful. His striking is a means to an end. And of course, he's breakable. He is finishable. In 6 losses, he's been finished 5 times. That's really why I predict this fight ends at a finish. It's almost irrelevant who Jimmy Flick is fighting. It's because Jimmy Flick is fighting. He's either going to win by submission or lose by TKO. He's only lost by TKO to really good fighters. Charles Johnson, Levi Moles, this guy who can definitely hang with the UFC level. Chris Gutierrez, I hear he's doing well. Got him out of there with the leg kicks in round 3. Also beat him by decision in a Muay Thai fight. Ray Rodriguez knocked him out in round 2 after being dominated, of course. And Will Campuzano, former UFC fighter, also knocked him out. Jimmy Flick's only lost to really good fighters, only been finished by really good fighters, but he has been finished 5 times. And here at the UFC level, he's going to be fighting really good fighters. And that's my assessment of Alessandro Costa. I think he's a really good fighter, Alessandro Costa. He is 12-3 as a pro, 3 knockouts, 6 submissions, 3 decisions. His 3 losses come 2 by knockout, 1 by decision. The knockout was to Amir Albazi in his debut, one of the knockouts. That was a round 3 knockout in a very good fight. I thought Costa was very much in that fight, especially early on. But Albazi right now, he is one of the top 5 fighters in the world. Maybe he's like number 3 or whatever. And say what you will about the decision. I'm just stating facts. He's ranked really highly. And that fight wasn't long ago at all. It might have been like this year. I don't even remember when the fight was. But either way, it's amazing. Alessandro Costa's looking to get his first win, and his only loss was to a guy who could be fighting for the title next. So no shame in that loss. His other knockout loss was to this guy, Uriel Cosio. That was a 2nd round knockout after he was doing really well. Really, really well early on. 10-8'd him. Dominated him. And then just got a little overzealous and got TKO'd or clipped and TKO'd early in round 2. And then the decision loss is this guy, Ivan Hernandez Flores, who beat him by split decision. That's a fight that I thought he won, to be honest, but still, it was back and forth. And, that guy's a good fighter, too. So no shame in that. But Alessandro, look, to win this fight, he's got to TKO Jimmy Flick, in my opinion. And even though he's only got 3 knockouts, let me say they're in his last 4 fights, and they all start standing. He finished one on the ground, but they all started standing. He knocked one guy out clean in 12 seconds with a right hand, TKO'd the other guy with a body shot, then pounded him out. And then the other guy, he beat him down pretty much. Beat him up against the cage, flying knee and everything else, and then settled into full mount. And the fight was over 10 seconds later. So he's a dangerous guy. He's shown to have a good striking acumen on the feet. And even though he was knocked out in his last fight against Amir Albazi, I still like what I saw from him in that fight and what I've seen from him in every other fight. He's a submission artist first and foremost. Really crafty guy too. And a wily scrambler. And I think that's only going to serve to help him if he finds himself in precarious spots against Jimmy Flick. But overall, he's getting a TKO finish. That's my prediction for this fight. Alessandro Costa, TKO, late round 2, getting Jimmy Flick tired. I have not bet on it. I'm waiting to see some prop bets. The under is minus 250 for 2.5 rounds. I honestly see value on that, but not enough value. And I'm waiting for the prop bets. But I will be playing Alessandro Costa by finish, or if the TKO is more likely. And I do think, Jimmy Flick, his only path to victory in most of his UFC fights is a first-round finish. And really, if you can isolate that to submission and get juicier odds, if it's worth it, then first-round submission. But I don't expect that here. I think Jimmy Flick is going to do well early on, but then not do well later on. And he's going to get TKO'd. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.